You know, the weirdest part isn't the fear. It's the quiet that comes after. The silence where something used to be. That's the part that really gets into your bones. Before all this, my life was the opposite of quiet. It was a roar. A constant, deafening, beautiful roar. My name's Marcus, and for 15 years, the sound of my life was the thunder of 10,000 people chanting my name, the squeak of my sneakers on polished hardwood, the sharp snap of a net as the ball dropped through. I was a star. Not just a player, but a spectacle. People paid to see me fly, to hang in the air for that extra split second that seemed to defy physics. Every dunk was a headline, every game winner a piece of history. My body was my billboard, my performance, my legacy, and I loved it. I breathed it because for me, it was never just about the money or the fame. It was about being seen, truly, undeniably seen. My whole life before that point had been about fighting to exist in a space that didn't seem to want me. I wasn't the kid born with a silver spoon or the one with effortless God-given talent. I was the scrawny kid who was always picked last, the one who spent more time feeling the cold sting of a metal bench on the back of his legs than the leather of the ball in his hands. I can still smell the gym from back then. Stale sweat, floor wax, and the bitter scent of my own frustration. I'd watch the other boys, the naturals, and a cold dread would fill my gut. The fear wasn't about losing a game. It was about being a ghost. It was the terror of walking through the world and leaving no impression, no dent, no memory. The thought that I could live an entire life and at the end of it, it would be as if I had never been there at all. That was the monster under my bed. So I worked. I didn't just practice, I waged war on my own limitations. I ran until my lungs burned like fire, shot until my arms were numb, and jumped until my legs screamed. Every single achievement, every point I scored was me screaming back at that silence, at that fear of being forgotten. I am here, I was yelling. You can't ignore me. You will remember me. My mansion, the cars, the trophies glinting in their glass cases, they weren't just luxuries. They were proof. They were my anchors to reality, solid evidence that Marcus existed, that he mattered. That's why it had to be a puddle. Isn't that ironic? The thing that came from me wasn't a monster with claws or a phantom in the dark. It was something small, quiet, and passive. I first saw it in the corner of my basement, a place I'd converted into a personal museum of my own life. Down there, framed jerseys hung on the wall like sacred relics. Basketballs from championship games sat on pedestals, and a massive screen replayed my greatest hits on a silent loop. I'd gone down to check on a water heater that was making a funny noise when I saw it. It was a dark patch on the polished concrete, maybe 30 centimeters across. It looked like an oil spill, but without the rainbow shimmer. It was just black. A deep, flat, light-devouring black. It wasn't reflecting the overhead lights at all. It was like a hole had been punched through the floor, a little circle of absolute nothing. And I remember feeling more annoyed than anything else. A leak, I thought. Something to call a plumber about. But as I leaned in closer, a strange, cold feeling washed over me. It wasn't just a puddle. It was a void. I stood there for what felt like an hour, just staring from the truncated brush in my hand to the placid, unmoving black circle on the floor. My brain refused to compute. It kept trying to file the information under a known category, acid, fire, sharp blade, but none of them fit. This was a quiet, clean, absolute removal. Panic started to bubble up in my chest, cold and sharp. This wasn't a stain, this wasn't a leak, this was something else. This was a violation of rules I didn't even know existed. I had to know more. The fear was terrible, but the not knowing was worse. My eyes scanned the room, landing on the shelves of my lesser trophies. Not the big ones, the championship MVPs, but the smaller ones from my journey up. My gaze settled on one in particular, a small bronze-plated statue on a marble base. Most Improved Player Northwood High. It was the first award I'd ever won, the first piece of physical proof that my work mattered, that I was starting to carve out a space for myself. It was a symbol of the beginning of my entire life's mission. A part of me screamed not to do it, to leave it alone, to run upstairs and call someone, a scientist, a priest, anyone. But another, more dominant part, the part that had pushed me through years of pain and doubt, needed to see. I walked over, my legs feeling like they were moving through water. I picked up the trophy. It was heavy in my hand, real, solid. I walked back to the edge of the puddle. I knelt down, my knee cracking in the silence. I couldn't bring myself to drop it. Instead, I gave it a gentle push, rolling it like a bowling ball across the smooth concrete. It slid silently, heading straight for the blackness. The front edge of the marble base touched the puddle, and it began to unravel. It didn't sink, it just vanished slice by slice as it rolled forward. The marble base disappeared, then the little gold plaque with my name on it. The bronze legs of the tiny basketball player were next, then his torso. For a horrifying split second, I saw his little headless body before it too was consumed. And then it was over. The trophy was gone. The puddle was unchanged. It hadn't grown, it hadn't rippled. It had simply eaten my memory, my proof, and left nothing behind. And the most terrifying part? For a single cold moment, I couldn't quite remember what was written on the little gold plaque. The image of the words, my own name, was foggy, like a dream you forget the moment you wake up. The quiet in the room was no longer just silence. It was an absence. I scrambled backwards, my hands slapping against the cold concrete, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. My mind was a vortex of pure, unadulterated terror. It wasn't just that the trophy was gone, it was the chilling psychic echo of its departure. I closed my eyes tight, trying to picture it. The weight of the marble base, the cool smoothness of the bronze, the sharp edges of the engraved letters of my name. But the image was slippery, indistinct. It was like trying to grasp smoke. The memory was there, but it was hollowed out, its details devoured. The visceral proof of my first real step towards being someone was now a mental ghost, a story I could tell myself but could no longer truly feel. That was the real horror. This thing, this quiet little puddle, didn't just destroy things, it unmade them in your mind too. It consumed the past. I scrambled up the stairs and locked the basement door as if that could contain a thing that defied physics. For the next week, I was a wreck. I tried to pretend it never happened. I called my agent, apologized for being out of touch, and promised I'd be at practice, but I was lying. The house, my fortress of self, felt like a tomb. Every shadow in every corner looked like it was growing, deepening. I couldn't look at my reflection without seeing that black, empty circle superimposed over my own eyes. I started drinking, which was something I never did during the season. I just wanted to numb the gnawing dread, to silence the part of my brain that was screaming. But the alcohol only made the memory of the fading trophy feel even more distant, even more unreal, which only fed the panic. My life, once a rigid structure of training, diet, and performance, fell apart. I spent my days pacing the house, jumping at every creak of the floorboards. I was a prisoner. The basement door became a source of magnetic terror. I couldn't go near it, but I also couldn't stop thinking about what was behind it. I started having nightmares, not of monsters, but of emptiness. I'd dream I was playing in a packed arena, the roar of the crowd shaking the rafters, and I'd look down to see the court beneath my feet was the same oily black liquid. I'd feel myself sinking, not into water, but into nothing, the cheers of the crowd fading into an absolute eternal silence. I knew I was losing my mind. I had to get out. I needed to feel something real, something solid.
I needed to feel the satisfying slap of a basketball against my palms, the familiar ache in my muscles, the simple grounding reality of a physical court beneath my feet. My own private court was too close to the basement, too close to that thing. I needed somewhere else. An image surfaced in my mind, the old courts at the abandoned Westbrook complex on the edge of town. It was where I used to go as a kid when I needed to escape, a place of cracked asphalt and rusted hoops. It was real. It was gritty. It was everything my polished life wasn't. It was perfect. I drove out there as the sun was setting, a heavy autumn storm having just passed through. The air was thick and smelled of rain-soaked earth and decay. The Westbrook complex was even more derelict than I remembered. The chain-link fences were buckled and choked with weeds. The bleachers were just splintered, rotting planks. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic drip, drip, trip of water falling from a rusted gutter and the lonely creak of a gate swinging in the wind. It was desolate. It was forgotten. And for some reason, that comforted me. This place had been forgotten by everyone, but it still existed. It still was here. I grabbed my ball from the trunk and started to shoot. The motion was automatic, a piece of muscle memory so deep it felt like breathing. Dribble, spin, shoot. The ball arced through the damp air, a dark sphere against a bruised purple sky, and dropped through the chain net with a satisfying metallic rattle. For the first time in weeks, the knot of fear in my stomach loosened just a little. I was still here. I was still Marcus. Dribble, spin, shoot. The rhythm was a prayer. I lost track of time, focusing only on the repetition, on the solid, tangible reality of the ball and the hoop. Then on a clumsy release, the ball hit the rim at a bad angle and bounced away erratically. It skittered across the wet asphalt, heading directly for a long drainage ditch that ran along the side of the court. No, 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 I muttered, jogging after it. As I got closer, a cold spear of dread pierced through the fragile piece I'd found. The ditch was filled with rainwater, but it wasn't reflecting the yellow street lamp. It was a long, thin line of perfect, oily blackness. It was the same. The ball rolled to the edge and plopped in, disappearing without a splash. It was just gone. I stopped dead. My heart felt like it had seized in my chest. Run, every instinct screamed. Just run away and never look back. But the ball, it was my ball. It was a part of me. To leave it was to admit defeat, to let the fear win. My whole life was built on not backing down. I walked to the edge of the ditch, my sneakers squelching on the muddy ground. I could see the black liquid, still and utterly void. Taking a shaky breath, I told myself it was just muddy water. It was just a shadow. I reached my right foot out and stepped in.
There was no sensation of wetness, no feeling of cold water soaking into my sock. There was just nothing, a complete absence of feeling, like my leg had been unclogged from my own nervous system. It was a strange, terrifying numbness that was somehow colder than any ice. I ignored it, pushed the rising panic down, and blindly fished around with my foot until I nudged the ball. I hooked it with my ankle, dragged it out of the ditch, and quickly pulled my leg out. I snatched the ball and practically sprinted back to my car, my heart trying to beat its way out of my ribcage. I threw the ball in the back, got in, and drove away, not looking back. The drive home was a blur. The numb feeling in my leg slowly faded, replaced with pins and needles, and then eventually, nothing. I convinced myself it was just the cold, that I had imagined the void-like sensation. Denial is a powerful thing. I got home, showered, and tried to watch a game on TV, forcing myself into a routine of normalcy. But I felt light, unsteady. It wasn't until I stood up to get a glass of water that I looked down, and my world ended. My legs, from the knee down weren't there. Not in the way you'd expect, anyway. They were a shimmering, translucent mist, faintly swirling like heat haze off a summer road. I could see the pattern of the hardwood floor right through them. I let out a choked, strangled sound that wasn't a scream. It was the sound of a mind breaking. I tried to take a step, a frantic, desperate command from my brain to my body, but there was nothing to command. My misty, ethereal foot passed straight through the solid oak of the floor. I didn't fall. I didn't stumble. I just floated. I was standing, but not standing, anchored to the spot by a reality that no longer applied to me. My body, the one that I had honed into a living spectacle, the source of my identity, my fame, my very existence, was gone, and I was a ghost in my own house.
The hours that followed were a new dimension of hell. I was an invisible, intangible prisoner in the monument I'd built to myself. Panic gave way to a frantic, desperate struggle. I tried to touch things to prove I was still there. I waved my misty hands through the back of a leather armchair, feeling nothing. I tried to pick up one of my own trophies, a gleaming symbol of my past life, and my formless fingers passed through the cold metal like it was air. I tried to scream, to make a sound, to break a window, anything to signal my presence to the outside world, but I was pure consciousness, a silent observer trapped behind a one-way mirror. The next morning, my girlfriend, Anna, found the front door unlocked and my car in the driveway. The horror that unfolded was the most exquisite torture I could have ever imagined. I watched her call my name, her voice tight with worry. I was floating right behind her, screaming her name back, but no sound came out. I tried to grab her shoulder, to touch her face, and my essence passed right through her. She shivered for a second, a brief, fleeting chill, and then moved on. I watched the police arrive. I watched my agent, my parents, my friends, all gathered in my living room, their faces etched with fear and confusion. I was in the room with them, a silent, screaming ghost watching my own disappearance unfold. I saw Anna collapse into my father's arms, sobbing my name, and I tried to hold her, to comfort her, my entire being straining with the effort, but I was nothing more than a cold spot in the air she walked through. This was it. This was the ultimate horror. It wasn't just being forgotten after I was gone, it was being forgotten while I was still here. I was a ghost in my own life, screaming at the top of my non-existent lungs, and no one could hear me. I was completely and utterly erased, forced to witness the world I once dominated move on, leaving no space for me at all. The days bled into a timeless, featureless agony. My physical unraveling was complete, but a more terrifying dissolution was just beginning. The puddle's influence wasn't just on matter, it was on the very concept of being. My memories, the bedrock of my identity, began to fray at the edges. First, it was the small things, the taste of my favorite pregame meal, the specific feeling of a certain championship win. They became hazy, distant. Then bigger pieces started to go. I'd look at my mother's crying face and struggle for a terrifying second to remember her name. The highlights playing on a loop on the basement TV became a slideshow of a stranger, a talented athlete I had no connection to. The face of the scrawny kid on the bench, the one whose fear had fueled my entire existence, became a phantom I could no longer recognize. I was not just being unmade from the world, I was being unmade from myself. My consciousness, this floating, helpless viewpoint, was being hollowed out, one memory at a time. The fear of being forgotten had manifested into a reality more horrific than my worst nightmares. The world was forgetting me, and now I was forgetting myself. In my final moments of lucidity, as the last vestiges of my life story dissolved into the encroaching nothingness, a single, clear image flared in my mind. The face of an old teammate from high school, someone I hadn't thought about in 20 years. He was smiling at me after I won that first small trophy. For a beautiful, heartbreaking instant, I existed again in someone else's memory.
I was real. Then that too faded into the blank, silent static. There was no pain, no final thought. Just a quiet cessation. A place where Marcus once was. And somewhere, in a decaying sports complex on the edge of town, a long black puddle in a drainage ditch sits patiently, reflecting nothing, waiting.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. Like and subscribe for more nightmares. Your support keeps the darkness from consuming this channel, so we can face the next terrifying story together. Don't be left in the dark.